Hello and welcome back to another episode of a Cozy Christmas podcast. My name is Art. Well, I've had to do some rearranging of my episodes because we have some time-sensitive information we want to get out to you folks. But I have a guest on today, Mark Shanahan. He's the playwright and author of the stage play, A Sherlock Carol. Longtime listeners of the show will know who Mark is. He first came on back in 2021 when A Sherlock Carol was first getting started, and now here we are 2-3 years later. It's starting to be performed around the country and in England. I'm going to go ahead and be quiet here, and I'll play my interview with Mark Shanahan. Welcome back to the Cozy Christmas podcast. My guest today is a returning guest, and he's the author of the stage play, A Sherlock Carol, there we go, and many others. It's been a long day, Mark.
That's all right. I've had them too.
Yes. Welcome back to the Cozy Christmas podcast.
Thanks very much. I'm glad to be here with you again, Art.
You bet. Yeah. Well, it's been a year. This is becoming something of a tradition. And I've noticed, as you've been sharing, that it looks like the Sherlock Carol is starting to kind of expand itself. So that's got to be exciting for you.
It is exciting. The play, which is a combination of the worlds of Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories and Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, in which a grown-up Tiny Tim meets a dissolute Sherlock Holmes and hires him to solve the mysterious death of an Ebenezer Scrooge. We premiered it 2 years ago, as you recall, in 2021, in the midst of a pandemic still. I mean, who opens an off-Broadway play in the midst of a pandemic? But we did it, and it was met with great success. And that year, we didn't know. We didn't know how it would go. We opened it at New World Stages, and right in the heart of Times Square in the theater district, and at a beautiful 500-seat theater that I'd been to many times. And it was a great thrill, with an extraordinary cast of Broadway veterans. And it was just such a thrill to be back after a year and more of sitting there wondering if the theater would ever be able to open its doors again. And our production that year had great success. It was nominated for an award from the Off-Broadway Alliance as Best Play, and also was a New York Times Critics Pick. And we brought it back the following year, and last year in 2022. But it also premiered in London last year at the Marylebone Theatre, and it is back this year in its second year. But only this year was it published by Broadway Licensing, or also known as Dramatist Play Services. And so all these other theaters suddenly got to find it. It was published this April. And so this year there have been 14 productions around the country, as well as returning in London. And it's been really amazing for me. I directed it at the New York production as well as wrote it, but it's been crazy to see on Facebook and social media elsewhere, other people putting up pictures of their productions. And it's been such a thrill to realize that there are people out there all across the country in theaters reimagining it and doing it their own way and coming up with the characters the way they'd like to do it. And I get such a great kick out of it. And we're just getting word that it was only published in April of this year, as I say, that it's really taking off, and some other theaters will be bringing it around the country next year as well. So, yeah, it's growing. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, this is mostly just curiosity, but
Yeah.
so if a production wanted to do your play, how do they go about doing that?
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's because it's published by Dramatist Play Service. You can find the rights. If you just purchase the play, you find a little thing in the beginning of it that says, "Here's the contact," and you purchase the rights for however many performances you're going to do it, and however big a theater it is, and according to whether it's amateur or professional or school play, there are different rates and all that. I gather, but I don't know too much about that side of it.
Okay.
But right there in Dramatist Play Service, just like every other play that you know of, you can just license the rights, and any theater can do it anywhere in the country. Yeah.
All right. So even like a community theater type.
Absolutely.
Location.
I'm glad to say there are a lot. So there's even a high school doing it that sent me
wow.
their program this year, which was a great kick.
Wow.
And then, there are friends in professional theaters that I know who are also doing it in Florida. Rep just closed last night, actually. They don't run until Christmas. They just finished their run and they had sellout crowds and they were doing great down there. And then I hear of a community theater somewhere also doing really well. They sent me pictures of their
Mm.
production and they said, we sold out too. So I'm just having the biggest thrill and the biggest kick seeing all the different kinds of theater makers and the kinds of theaters from professional to non-professional to the London production to a high school. It's just such a great kick to imagine all that happening.
Mm. Yeah. Is it also, well, I guess, how are you at seeing other people, take over your creation like that?
I'm really, really good at it. I
Yeah,
mean,
good.
I loved making it. And in fact, I want to tell you that our New York cast and design team are all joining me for another production of it that I'm directing right now. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But
Hmm.
the truth of the matter is that my goal here isn't that I'm the only person who does it. My goal is to put it out there in the world and see what happens when other people take their turn at it. And so the production that I just mentioned down in Florida Rep sent me pictures where they have a live piano player on stage accompanying it, whereas I have recorded sound from my wonderful sound designer, John Gramata. And
Hmm.
I just love the thought that the play can be done in so many different ways, different permutations. It can be cast any number of ways. And although the play was written for 6 actors, I write in the preface, these 6 actors play multiple roles or 4 of them. And it could be done by a cast of 20 something if you want. It can be as small or as large as you want it. So it's an agreeable play for different kinds of theater companies to be able to do in different ways, and I get a kick out of it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting to direct a couple of performances, you said then.
Well, the London production still bears my name on it in the second year because I went over there and directed it last year, and I have a
Okay.
wonderful associate director who's put it in this year with mostly the same cast, a couple of cast changes with some wonderful new actors who we auditioned and just have jumped right into it, and it's being really well received over there. But in the past year, kind of the big event in my life is I actually took a job. Although I live in New York City, I took a job as artistic director, which is the job in which you're the leader of a theater in terms of programming and keeping the artistic side of its life healthy,
Hmm.
of a very wonderful theater that I've worked at for nearly 20 years called the Westport Country Playhouse in Westport, Connecticut. And it's only an hour's train ride from Manhattan, from Grand Central, which is easy enough and actually gives me a little bit of time to think sometimes in the
Mm.
morning. But because we're only 40 or 45 miles from Broadway, we often are able to call on some of the best actors in New York City to come on up and do a play, do a reading, do a concert. And the Playhouse itself has had an extraordinary history that I'd love to tell you a little bit about.
Hmm.
But the important and great thing that I'm sure for considering the title of your podcast is that this year, instead of doing it in New York City, because I've taken this job at the Playhouse, I called on everyone from the New York production and I said, listen, the Playhouse, which had been like so many nonprofits struggling in this past year, is getting on its feet and there's a new kind of energy about the place. And we need to do some family friendly shows. We need to put something in that people don't expect. And I asked everyone involved in the New York production if they would jump on the train and come on up and do a Sherlock Carol at the Playhouse. And
Hmm.
within 30 minutes of my putting that email out, everyone wrote back and said, absolutely, absolutely, we'll be there. And every one of them, not only are they all Broadway veterans, my cast, but they're also Playhouse veterans. I've dragged them up there as a director for some work at times. So they have a great love of the place as well. Our design team, although we have a new set designer, my old set designer, the wonderful Anna Luizos, donated some of the pieces from our New York production to say, of course, you've got to use them. Of course, you've got to keep going. And our new set designer for the Playhouse, James Fenton, did a beautiful job putting his stamp on it. So we have a kind of a combination of those designers. Linda Cho, award-winning costume designer, Tony Award-winning Broadway costume designer, who did our New York production, has all of our costumes in storage and ready to go for us right now. And Gramata, our wonderful Broadway's best sound designer, was just at the Playhouse with us doing tech and even making changes this year to make it even better as we put all this together with the new lighting designer, Ali Doherty, as well. And so we are up there and have a run of Sherlock Carol at the Westport Country Playhouse starting tomorrow night through this week. It's only a 1 week run, but we are
Hmm.
able to have student matinees, something we never had in New York, which is making me thrilled. And we are practically sold out in our 575 seat historic 94-year-old institution, the Westport Country Playhouse, which is
Wow.
such a thrill.
Yeah. Oh man, that's got to be so exciting
It
for you.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It feels like so many things came together to make this happen in such an incredible way.
Let's see. So the actors involved for you then are the ones that have been the last couple of years, and I
Yeah,
forget.
and the ones who couldn't come, yeah, Drew McVitie, who is also one of our producers
That's
in New
him.
York, but he's a Broadway veteran of, God, I can't even
Hmm.
tell you how many Broadway shows he's done. He played Sherlock Holmes for us. Alan Gilmore, our Scrooge, actually is up the road at Hartford Stage playing Scrooge in A Christmas Carol this year,
Mm.
in a regular traditional Christmas Carol. So we lost him, though he keeps writing us and saying, "How's it going down there?" So there's a
Yeah.
great sense of camaraderie. And any of the actors who we couldn't have with us this time, we also had this wonderful deep bench of excellent understudies who covered the roles in New York. And so a few of them are stepping in as well and know the roles intimately, and they get a chance to shine because we all felt like stewards of this story. There was a
Hmm.
real sense of community among this cast. And I'm thrilled to see everyone get their turn at bat, if you will. Yeah.
Didn't you also write a Christmas Carol play or a version? Am I remembering right?
Yeah, thank you for remembering that. I have written a regular version of A Christmas Carol, which I titled A Merry Little Christmas Carol, which has been done at theaters around the country. And in fact, it's happening in particular at Virginia Stage right now, a wonderful, beautiful theater in Norfolk, Virginia, where I head next month to direct Dial M for Murder, in
Mm.
keeping with the mystery theme.
Hmm.
And they're having great success with it. And my big hope is that someday these two plays will be done in rep at a theater. So A Christmas Carol and Sherlock Carol, which is its sort of sequel,
Hmm.
could happen with the same cast on the same stage somewhere, and that's my great hope.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. You could have
Yeah.
one really long play at night or something.
Well, you'd alternate nights and buy a
Okay.
ticket to one and get half price of the other, and
Oh,
see the
okay. I
connections
see.
between the two, hopefully. And
I
yeah.
see. Yeah. You gotta hook them in with one, and
Well, I never would have gotten the idea to write a Sherlock Carol had I not figured out how to write my own adaptation of A Christmas Carol, because I love the Dickens book so much. But
hmm.
I had to figure out what I wanted to say by making it a play, because there have been so many adaptations of it. And I became really intricately, like really, really deeply, and fell in love with the language of Dickens' Christmas Carol. And it stuck with me, so that the format of it and some of the narration could find its way into the Sherlock Holmes mystery, which is based on Doyle's only Christmas story, though it's set slightly after Christmas, The Blue Carbuncle, The
Hmm.
Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. So, with those two authors' texts in mind, I could fashion my own play of combining their writing styles and create a new plot and a new way of looking at these characters, if you will.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, are you? What I guess what drew you to use Sherlock Holmes? Was it? Are you a fan, or is it just because
I
he was
am,
in that
yeah.
time? Yeah.
As a kid, my dad took me down to a place called Theater 80 on Second Avenue in the East Village when I was about 10 years old, to see some second run movies. Back when you could only see a movie on TV in the afternoon when it was
Yep.
run, or maybe you could rent it at the video store. But I fell in love with those Sherlock Holmes movies, Basil Rathbone movies, and then I got the complete adventures of Sherlock Holmes as a book, and I devoured them, and I loved them. I really did.
Hmm.
And I have gone around the country, as I've told you before. I love mysteries, and I've gone around the country directing some of them at wonderful theaters around the United States. And I also see how A Christmas Carol sometimes drags in new people who might not have otherwise have gone to see to the theater.
Yeah.
And very often, A Christmas Carol, as I often say, is somebody's first exposure to live performance. And sometimes that's the same way with a murder mystery. There's a different audience that comes to it. So I jokingly had told you I think of it as the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup play, where it's two great tastes that taste great together. That I
Yeah.
put these two things together to try and see if they could become a new way of looking at characters you already thought you knew, and have a new kind of version of A Christmas Carol, as well as a new kind of version of a Sherlock Holmes story.
Hmm.
And it should be highly theatrical and fun and feel like something that you can only see in the theater with great actors bringing it to life in a way that excites an audience's imagination,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we're doing up at the Playhouse.
Yeah. I like this idea because one of the, if there's one thing, and I think A Christmas Carol is pretty much perfect, but the what I want to know is what happens to Scrooge afterwards, and I think your play kind of explores that a bit.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
As I love to talk about it, is that we really only get to see Scrooge at the end of that book, and in
Mm-hmm.
any version, on whether it's Muppets or Alistair Sim or anyone else doing their version of A Christmas Carol,
Mm-hmm.
we see him at the end for the last 5 minutes having transformed into the best version of himself. He becomes as good a man as this good old city ever knew, as Dickens wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And as he walks around town and people are stunned to see him no longer, looking at them and saying bah humbug and being cruel and mean, and seeing him changed and knowing that he has the time to give of himself and to be of service to others, you realize, I wonder what happened after this story opened. We know that Tiny Tim lives,
Mm-hmm.
but how else did Scrooge manage to change people's lives? And did he actually keep Christmas in his heart all year as he said he would? And I like to think that, of course, he did. And so in my play, what we find is in the ensuing years, he gave it all away and did anything he could to help. I always like to think that at the end of Christmas Carol, Scrooge doesn't stand at that tombstone and say, I want to go back. I want to live, because he's afraid of death. It's because he actually realizes that the lessons the ghosts have taught him is that he had wasted his time on earth, that he did not do what he was meant to do, which is to be of service to other people. That's what we should all do, is to help each other and live our best lives and be our best versions of ourselves, as hard as it is sometimes. And I'd like to think in Sherlock Carol, what we find is that Sherlock Holmes is now feeling a little Scrooge-like himself. But when he investigates Scrooge's life, what he's really trying to find out is, how can a man change? How does a person really change? And everyone says, well, he had this Christmas where he was visited by ghosts. And of course, Sherlock Holmes is the last person who would believe in ghosts, because
Mm-hmm.
in The Adventure of the Sussex Vampire, he says, no ghosts need apply. And he would never believe in something like that. Now, of course, Arthur Conan Doyle believed in plenty of things like spiritualism and
Yeah.
the afterlife and all sorts. But Holmes is a detective and a scientist in many regards. So to put a character who doesn't believe in things like that up against one of the most famous characters of all time from the best ghost story, who
Mm-hmm.
does believe in ghosts, is a great clash of styles, but also a wonderful chance for them to learn for each other. I've said as a joke, I don't really feel like sometimes I wrote the play, because the characters, if you love them and you know them well, they start to tell you what they would say if they were to meet. And I've jokingly said that inviting these characters into the same play is like having a dinner party where you invite people from different social circles that you like, but you hope they get along. And I was so pleased to find out that a grown-up Tiny Tim and a Dr. Watson and maybe an Irene Adler and a couple of Fezziwigs and an old Joe from Christmas Carol and a Mrs. Dilber, they
Yeah.
could all meet and exist in the same world rather effortlessly.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, speaking of old Joe, I saw on your social media you had posted a picture of an Easter egg. And it took me a while looking at the picture, but I finally caught it. That to another famous mystery film.
Yeah. Well,
That was
from A
fun.
Christmas Carol that old Joe owns a junk shop where in the future Scrooge sees Mrs. Dilber, his maid, go to hawk his belongings at old Joe's. Old Joe makes a good appearance in a Sherlock Carol as Sherlock goes to look for a clue at this junk shop. And so on stage, we've dressed the set so that old Joe has a lot of tchotchkes and nonsense in his cart. And I happen to have in my bookcase a replica of the Maltese Falcon, and I place it on stage because if you know the book, The Maltese Falcon, Caspar Gutman's been looking for the Maltese Falcon and has traded hands over the years so many times over the generations. And I like to think that in 1894, old Joe had no idea that he actually had this valuable thing in his possession. So I brought it up from my home and threw it on the set, and only an eagle-eyed audience member will see it. But it gave me a lot of personal chuckles to
That's
enjoy that.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife and my kids somewhat, but they've been involved with a community theater about 20 minutes from us.
All right.
Really, really great. This past year, or this year they did Little Women, and
Oh, wonderful.
my wife
Yeah.
got to play Aunt March, and
Of course.
she loved it. She loved it. But the director, the guy who runs the company, he loves putting little Easter eggs in from his past shows, and so there'll be if you can work it in, there's a suitcase from the Music Man.
I
You
love
know,
it.
it's
I
stuff
love
like
it.
that. It's just funny.
Well, I'll tell you, there's another Easter egg in the play, but it would be hard pressed to find it unless he came up on stage to really look closely. But there's a scene in the Sherlock Carol where Holmes goes backstage at a theater into the dressing room of the Countess of Morcar, who's just given a concert. And among her theater paraphernalia, we've put a lot of posters and things on it. But then there's one poster from the actual Westport Country Playhouse itself, as if she played there, even though the Playhouse didn't open until 1931. But it gave us a lot of joy to put it up there because the Playhouse
Yeah.
itself has an incredible history. And I just want to tell, if you don't mind, I just want to tell you a little bit about it
Oh,
because
please. Yeah.
in the nearly 20 years that I've been involved there, I arrived there as an actor in a wonderful play called Journey's End by R.C. Sheriff, a World War I play, and then got to play David Copperfield and Phileas Fogg and Around the World in 80 Days and a lot of other great roles. And then eventually my friend Annie Keefe, who ran the Script in Hand series where we did readings, handed that over to me. And I've been running the Script in Hand series where we do some great plays that sometimes don't get done anymore and even some new plays also. And we've cultivated a great audience, but it's also because people love coming to the Playhouse to participate in the history of the Playhouse. And right there off of I-95, or if you're taking the Merritt, it's not that far right off the highway. It's this beautiful old structure that looks like a big old barn. And although it was renovated 25 years ago now, or 20 years ago, it really still maintains the aura and a lot of the history of its original structure because it was built as a tannery in the 1800s. And in 1931, having sat there for about 10 years dormant, it was purchased for a song and turned into a theater, which went on what was called the Straw Hat Circuit. In those days, when the Broadway theaters closed down in the 1930s because there was no air conditioning, a lot of the stars went on a summer tour of plays. So the Cape Playhouse up in Dennis, Massachusetts, and in Maine, the Ogunquit Playhouse, they share some of the same posters that we have lining the walls at the Westport Country Playhouse with some of the best names that I'm just going to read them off in a litany of the best names of the last 100 years of Broadway and Hollywood, from Kitty Carlisle and Burgess Meredith and Ruth Gordon and Henry Fonda, Gene Kelly and Paul Robeson, Tyrone Power. Thornton Wilder actually played there, and the author of Our Town, which was then later done at the Playhouse with Paul Newman playing the role of the stage manager of
Wow.
production, which moved on to Broadway. But in the 50s, there was John Forsythe and Eva Gabor and Imogene Coca, Lillian Gish, Groucho Marx played there, Basil Rathbone, Joan Fontaine, Tallulah Bankhead, the great Teresa Wright, who I had the great pleasure as a young actor of meeting also, Joel Grey, Liza Minnelli,
Mm-hmm.
Cicely Tyson, wonderful Barbara Bel Geddes. I'm trying to think
Mm-hmm.
of Keir Delay, Shirley Booth. I'm just trying to think of them all. Art Carney and Jose Ferrer, and I'd say Jane Alexander, Vincent Price for the
Yeah.
horror fans out there,
Yeah.
Shelley Winters, and Christopher Walken, who I had the pleasure of being on stage with there myself. It
Mm.
really has been an extraordinary parade of the greatest actors. And even in recent times, just this past year, we've had some of Broadway's best recently up there, from Andre DeShields to Tony winner Beth Level and Tony winner Celia Keenan Bolger and Deborah Monk, Kate Burton. It has been a place where actors feel at home and they love to come there. And we're so lucky because the Playhouse is in a beautiful structure. When I say it was renovated, Joanne Woodward was the artistic director when I arrived there 20 years ago. And she used to joke and say, well, it's the easiest thing in the world for me to raise funds when I say, you want to have lunch with my husband? And then Paul Newman would show up and say, now write us a check. But they did a beautiful job renovating the Playhouse. And in the back of the theater, when you walk in on stage from the hallways, from the dressing rooms, there are still the original floorboards from the Playhouse for the last 100 years. And I remember Joanne Woodward telling me as a young actor, put your both feet here. And now before you walk out there on stage, and now every one of those actors that I just mentioned will, like theater gods do, will watch over you and get you through the performance. And anyone who plays there feels that great history. And to now be in the position of being artistic director, which was Joanne's job there, following our wonderful recent and retiring artistic director, Mark Lamos, we've had such an incredible history there that as my first show of this era, to be able to put a Sherlock Carol in, something that I wrote and directed, feels particularly special to me. And to have all my friends come up and do it, and to have it sell out this week, feels
Mm-hmm.
like we're re-energizing the place and keeping it going. We're just a link in a chain that we hope goes much farther down the years than
Mm-hmm.
we can possibly imagine, and will just be a fond memory someday. But as we try to keep it going, like all theaters, it feels like a struggle. It feels like we're, pushing a boulder up a hill. But there's an excitement about putting a Sherlock Carol at the Westport Country Playhouse, and all the things we have coming up at the Playhouse too.
Yeah, I think, as we get more and more technology obsessed, there is that danger of we risk losing such places like that.
Yeah. Well, it is hard, Art. Like you think about it, you know, I sometimes feel that nowadays the theater, since the Greeks, they've been saying the theater is dead, right?
Mm,
But it's a resilient institution, always comes back. And there's so much competing for an audience's attention these days. But I
mm-hmm.
sometimes feel like the theater feels more special than ever before, because it is the last non-downloadable thing that we can do to create an audience. I go to the movie theater now, not as often as I used to, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but everyone's sitting on their phones in the movie theater, and the glow of people's phones is distracting, and it makes it really awful. But when we go to the live performance at the theater, we say, turn your cell phones off and lean into this and have an experience with everyone around you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm feeling that even as we've struggled to get people back after the pandemic, because we all got used to sitting at home, I'm feeling that now people appreciate it more, sitting with other people in the dark, laughing,
Yeah.
gasping, hearing a story well told by good actors. And it feels more special than it used to in some ways.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Um, we see the community theater I was telling you about. They
Yeah,
they did a couple months ago. They did a play version of "Lend Me a Tenor."
I love Lemmy Tenor, sure.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it was a
Lovely.
musical first or something. Or
Yeah, and there's another new version, Lend Me a Soprano,
okay,
that Ludwig has rewritten as well. Yeah.
but my wife wasn't in that one, but we went just to watch it, and a lot of her friends were in it, and it was a blast. Like you're saying, just
Yeah.
have people around you laughing and enjoying that shared experience, and something about it being a live performance. The director, he likes to come out and encourage the audience to be involved in, um, and then watching how the actors on stage start feeding off the energy of the crowd.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it.
There really is. It really is nothing like it. And, particularly a lot of professional theaters have pay what you will nights, or discounts for seniors, or for military, or for student rush on the day of. Although seems like an expensive thing to do sometimes, there are ways at theaters just like ours at Westport, we do this. There are ways in which you can get tickets and make it a habit of coming that won't break the bank too. Even in New York, I find I've walked up on Broadway to a window and said, "Do you have anything on the day of that's left?" And you can get a reasonable ticket for something that would have otherwise been very expensive. The
Mm-hmm.
theater feels sometimes like it's a rich man's sport, but it doesn't have to be. And that's why I also love that community theaters take their, actors who belong to a community, and then their friends show up and realize coming together is an extraordinary feeling. And,
Mm.
I think people need that sense of camaraderie.
Yeah, and just for what my wife has experienced, she has been able to make some friends through
Yeah.
that she just become so close with, and would never have even known them. I mean, they live 20 minutes from us, and she probably would never have met them if they hadn't had this shared
Well, standing on a stage
experience.
can be a terrifying thing. And when someone else has looked in your eyes and you've done a play together, is a bond like
Yeah.
no other. But I also find that people go to the theater and they talk in a lobby, and people make friends. Or even if they come back to the theater, they say, "Hey, I saw you here last time." It's also a way of connecting.
Hmm.
And it just takes, getting out there and doing it. But I think once people do, they recognize it's like a muscle that you keep exercising. It's a wonderful thing to keep going and find live performance as a way of connecting with other people.
Mm-hmm. Um, I I also do a another podcast where I talk
Yeah.
to authors and things. But one of the questions I like to ask them is, do you have any advice for new writers? So for you, do you have any advice for somebody's thinking, I might like to do acting or writing stage plays? What advice would you have for them?
Well, it's if you're trying to make a living at it, it can be such a brutal business, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can think of it also as trying to exercise your creative passions and find a way to do it, you inevitably, if that's what you're tapped on the shoulder to do, you're going to find a way. It doesn't always turn out to be the way you thought it would, but it is out there if you really pursue it. For a writer, particularly a playwright, I like to say, look around at what's needed right now. What theater is looking to produce, what kind of theater is looking to produce the kind of play that you want to write? And then look at how can you make it economical? How can you make it affordable for a theater to do? How can you give it a title that might entice people to come in? How can you figure a way to make sure that your play will find its audience? Everybody in the world has an idea for something, and they always say, what you should do, or something to every writer who, wants to
Mm-hmm.
sit down and start typing. But really, you have to figure out what it is you want to say through a piece, and then figure out how to make sure that it is, if it's a piece of theater, how it's affordable to produce. And then get it into the right hands and be willing to face a lot of rejection as
Mm-hmm.
you send it out. For actors, it's so sad to say this, but like you have to, unlike a writer, you can't just sit down and write. You have to actually find a stage to do it. And so you have to put yourself out there. You have to constantly keep auditioning and take a class, and even
Mm-hmm.
sometimes make your own work if it needs to satisfy you that way. But tenacity and perseverance and a little head smart of saying, what is it that's needed and how can I fulfill that need, can often be the key to getting your work done.
See that in my daughter. She, a couple years ago, when they first heard about this play, it was right after the pandemic. I think they were auditioning for Beauty and the Beast, and so my
Oh,
wife and Grace went to a tryout, but she really didn't want to. My daughter didn't. She's like, I don't know, because she just didn't know what it was. But then when she tried out and she got a part in the chorus, and both my wife and her did, but she just got the bug, and now
yeah.
she got to play in The Sound of Music they did last year. She got to play one of the Von Trapp kids, and then she's been involved in her school play. And I was telling you beforehand, she's now involved in speech. What do they call it? Forensics, I guess, is
Yeah, yeah.
the term. Yeah. So she's involved with that now, and she and her friend, they both sing really well. So they're for their speech meet, they're doing a song from the Little Women musical.
I love it. That's great.
Yeah, Gracie's telling me, she's like, Dad, you're gonna cry. It's the sad song. Like, okay, I'll fortify myself.
Well, I'll tell you this. My wife is a very good singer. She's a Broadway singer. She's been in a lot of
Okay,
Broadway musicals, and I can tell you that she kind of winces when even she hears me sing in the shower. So I might not be able to sing very well, but it doesn't stop me from trying. And
there you go.
part of that is like, if you feel like you got to do it, you're going to find a way. But no one's ever going to mistake me for, a beautiful singer. But I have to say, like, if you have, if you, like your daughter, she's got a talent for it and she wants to put it to use in some other ways. She's going to find a way to do it, which
Hmm.
is, it's great to hear that passion keeps moving.
I don't know. We've got a good. It's a small community of theater.
And where is it? Where exactly is it?
We're in rural Iowa, so the town, like, we live in a town of about 700 people,
Right.
next to a town of a little more than that, and then where the community theater is a town about 20 minutes up the interstate, and it's a little bit of a bigger town, but a couple thousand people, but
Love it.
they
Yeah.
make it work. They make it work, and
Fantastic.
the guy who's running it, he teaches high school drama, all that, as his main job, and he just loves the arts so much. He's doing this community theater.
Well, it is infectious. Yeah.
Yeah.
As someone, it's funny. There's really also no exact way to become a theater artist. Everyone think like no one really knows how to become a director.
Hmm.
There are programs you could study, or you can find yourself working at it and in the field. Our theater as a professional theater at the Westport Country Playhouse is filled with some of the greatest people we can get from New York. But the funny thing is, there's also people who you find and you go, this is your calling. I hate to tell you, this is it. And then you throw them in the room with people who've been doing it for decades
Hmm.
professionally. And it's a great lineage to pass it down to somebody. And for that theater teacher that you're mentioning who loves the theater, to find people who might not have done it before also and say, try it, find out what you can learn from it, and see if it's in your
Hmm.
heart to do. There really is something that people who love it share with each other and try and bring up the next people, because the theater's ephemeral. When the play goes, it's over, right?
Hmm.
So you got to keep the skills alive, and you keep the memories of it alive by passing it along to other people.
I like to watch, opening night performance, but I also love the closing night performance because,
Yeah.
especially as I get to know the people that behind the characters, you can see the emotion in their face, that almost at times sadness, but joy. It's like this is the last night. This
Yeah.
it'll
Yeah.
all be done, and yeah, yeah,
And that doesn't change whether you're doing a high school play or you're on Broadway.
right.
That is the inner child that all actors keep going.
Yeah,
Sometimes a play can be exhausting, and you go, "Oh, thank God it's over." But overall, you're looking for the next one if you love the theater. So,
that's right. That's right. Here before we can wrap up here, but I suppose we should talk a little bit about Christmas before I go. But what do you got coming up this year for Christmas?
well, I'm fortunate that I'm here. I'll be up at the Playhouse all the way through next week with Sherlock Carol doing the
Hmm.
curtain speech. And although as a director, now that the play will be open, I don't really like to watch it. I might sit out in the lobby or go to the bar at the theater with
There
some
you
of the
go.
other people who work there, because I just get too nervous while the audience is there. But I'll poke my head in. But my kid's school wraps up this week, and there's a Christmas assembly on Friday that I'll get to go to. And
Hmm.
my mom and dad are in their 80s, and my sister and her two children are here in New York City also. And so we have great traditions of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day that we've had every year of my life, that we are fortunate and blessed enough to participate in again this year. And I haven't quite finished my Christmas shopping because I've been so busy with the play. And I just saw on Amazon that it's pretty hard to get anything delivered by Christmas now. So I will be hitting the malls or going down to Columbus Circle to the on the subway to the holiday fair and trying to make sure that I get a couple of those last minute presents going. What about you?
Somehow I didn't wait to the last minute this year,
Attaboy.
so maybe I'm learning the lesson. But but yeah, my son, he's going to be home from college for a couple days anyway, so we'll get to have him home for Christmas. Then
Fantastic. That's
my
great.
wife's parents are going to be here, and I love spending time with them. So
Great.
yeah, it's just going to be another quiet Christmas. We don't really do much.
Hey, Art, I asked you this once before, I think. Do you generally get what you want when you ask for what you want for Christmas? Do you get what you want,
Yeah,
or yeah?
yeah,
Yep, yeah.
usually,
Do
yeah.
you make a list?
We
Do you
do.
put it
Yep.
out there? You do? Oh, yeah.
Even at 45, I still make my list. Yeah. This year, although this year I was really like, maybe I'm getting old enough now. I don't know, but just I don't know. I'm just pretty happy. Family's gonna be home and
Yeah.
all that. But so my wife, I've got a book list on Amazon. That I like books I want to buy or read. I've just been making a list, and so she's like, I'll just go shopping off of this, and I'm like, okay, that works. Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
But yeah, we're looking for just a quiet week and
Perfect.
enjoying family. Yeah.
Well, for a man who loves Christmas and knows a thing or two about how to celebrate Christmas, it sounds like you're doing it right.
Right after this, I've got plans to start my yearly rereading of A Christmas Carol. So
All right.
gonna get in the mood here.
Well, if you want, send me an email and I'll send you a PDF of a Sherlock Carol to play,
Yeah.
and you can read that as well and
Oh, I'd love to.
familiarize yourself with it. Yeah, I'd be
Yeah.
happy to have you. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
and then hopefully maybe that theater up the road someday will do it too, and you can actually see it on stage.
absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking, I don't, they don't usually do a winter play, but maybe I can twist their arm. So
I like your well, what's funny is actually a theater reached out to me and they said, we want to do it in July using our Christmas Carol set and do Christmas in July because they thought of it more as a mystery play that's set at Christmas time than a Christmas play. And I thought, well, that would be good. You come home from the beach or something and you go, tonight we have tickets to see a play where a bunch of people are wearing Victorian Christmas outfits, and I'd get a kick out of that.
Yeah, well, hey, Christmas in July is a big thing in the Christmas community. So
yeah.
Yep. Sounds that would work. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, Mark, best of luck to you again. Can't wait to see what you got coming next. And
thanks.
And I guess, as they say, break a leg, right?
I appreciate it. Yeah. If anyone who listens to your podcast is in the tri-state area and wants to come to the Westport Country Playhouse, you can find the last remaining seats available at westportplayhouse.org. We run this week through the 23rd, and we've got some of the best actors from New York up at this beautiful old theater, and we hope to see you there.
Absolutely. And if you go, tell them I said hi. So.
You got it, Art.
Yeah.
Thanks always for spreading word about the play and for spending time with me. I appreciate it every year.
You bet. Absolutely. Anything to help out, I'm glad to do it. So.
Oh, thanks, man. Great.
All right. Well, you guys have a Merry Christmas.
You too. Merry Christmas, Art. Be well.
Thank you so much for listening to the Cozy Christmas Podcast. If you would like to help support the show, the best thing that you can do is to share it on your social media account, share it with a friend, leave us a rating and a review, because that really does help get the word out. I could not do this without you guys, and I appreciate it all so much. If you would like to help us out in a financial way, there are several options for you listed in the show notes. You can make a donation on Ko-fi.com, and if you send me your address, I will send out a Christmas card with a bookmark or sticker as my way of saying thank you. There's also some t-shirts, podcast merchandise, hand-painted ornaments I've done over this past year. And a special thank you to Karen and Angela. Your support, not just your financial support, but your encouragement, your positivity, your absolute joy over what I do here really helps keep the podcast moving, and it keeps me inspired to keep doing what I'm doing. So thank you, and others who have given so generously this past year, thank you. And until next time, let's remember to honor Christmas in our hearts and try to keep it all the year. Have a very Merry Christmas.